So one of the things that I wanted to bring out and just reiterate is that no one ever addressed the AWOL.
Okay.
So these charges were never sustained.
Okay.
He's in there, and if you do an in-house suspension, it's a 5-day suspension. Regardless of anything, it still has to be signed off on. Still has to be charges that are sustained, charges that are, I mean, it has to be signed off on. He had no paperwork with him. I thought it was interesting.
So now things are piling up, right? So we have the AWOL, that's never been addressed.
Correct.
Now we have this situation where
this meeting.
Yeah, I'm about to say this. I know.
This
I'm trying to
meeting,
figure out what to call it, right?
this encounter at a odd hour,
exactly,
without the proper people being present
and the proper paperwork being done,
and the proper paperwork. That's correct.
To happen,
correct.
Right?
Correct.
Then we have this superior officer then also going around proper protocol to suspend you that night and disarm your firearm.
Well, the suspension itself also seemed erratic.
Well, that's what I was saying, right? Because you can't, I mean, that's like any job, right? Like,
oh, that's it, I'm going to suspend you tonight.
Exactly. It's not something that you could.
Did you have a plan when you came in?
Exactly. So now that we have these number of things that keep happening, right? And you are trying to figure out what is going on, right? So after he suspends,
I'm trying to figure out where this is going to end, how it's going to end, because no one's stopping him.
No, exactly. So my next question is, after you have this incident, were you suspended on paper, or was this, like, what happened? Because he technically suspended you in a way that he couldn't legally suspend you.
Correct.
And then you were eventually discharged. So how do those things connect?
The shock of him grabbing my gun and putting my life in danger was my focus.
Okay.
I deemed it to be a legitimate termination suspension because he said so. But the reality is he didn't follow protocol to do so. So I'm sure they backdated whatever they needed to backdate, and I'm sure they turned it into a legitimate suspension, which is a 5-day in-house suspension.
Okay.
At the end of my 5 days, I was at home wondering, what do I do now? Because I became a police officer, and there's certain things that you sign up for. There's a lot of things that happen. Being a female in a white Irish male organization where they didn't even want us to be on these jobs. Mm-hmm. So you're treated a certain way, you're talked to a certain way, you know what the culture is, you understand that.
And there's an expectation that you're just going to deal with.
You're just going to go along with it. And there's several things that I just dealt with.
You have a salary,
right?
And you're black, so
take it.
You should
deal
be
with
happy in your position.
That's correct.
Okay.
This was the straw that broke the camel's back. In addition to other things that I had endured, I'm at home and I'm saying, okay, if I report him, I know that there could be serious ramifications. Mm-hmm. He's white.
Both in your personal life, your professional life, you're concerned about them coming back at you, all right?
The retaliation, mm-hmm. all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. It was on this corner in 2003 that an officer tried to effect an arrest right on this corner. And
arrest you?
Arrest me.
Why?
Because there was a shooting on this street, and the shooting on this street was something that they thought I was aware of in terms of how they handled it. So I was present after the shooting occurred. They mishandled the crime scene, and they thought I was paying attention to that. And so a lot of retaliatory acts occurred after that because they felt like this role that I have in the community was also something that I was willing to do where I lived, right here on this very street. After the shooting occurred and they mishandled the crime scene, they didn't have a search warrant to do some of the things that they did. They felt that I was the person watching them, that I wasn't clearly one of them.
Okay.
And so,
was this during the 6 months that you were
No,
back
this was in 2003.
This was even further back before the 2010 AWOL incident. Okay, so
the captain that is in charge of this area where that shooting happened, where I almost got detained and arrested, he went and put me up on several charges.
Okay.
And
you were arrested that
they detained me, but they did not arrest me.
Okay, they detained you. And the reason I'm asking this, and I'm happy that you said the date 2003, is just to set the background, right?
There is background.
I
That's
said
correct.
that initially this started in 2010 because there was that kind of like that paperwork incident. But what I want people to really understand is that that incident occurred because there were already
there was already acrimony. There's already an acrimonious relationship. There was already perception.
Exactly.
There was already a perception that I was not with them. I was on the wrong side of the fence.
So you were othered, and they were trying to find a way to. You feel as though they were trying to find a way to push you out.
To push me out.
Okay.
Because of the work that I did.
Where that started. Right. Yep.
The fact that I did so much work with juveniles. I mean, I wasn't the only officer that did the work, but I'm sure the superior officers that I had.
I mean, but if you were a face in the community, like you said before, you're a black woman within the Boston Police Force, which automatically already makes you other, right? And then you're supporting your community on top of it, right? These sometimes are reasons why things like this happen, right? Unfortunately, right? And as I was talking to you, you and I were talking, and I was like, oh my God, like I even went through this type of situation, right? Where I was pushed out because I was a black woman in a particular position in the education space that wanted to support other black people.
Right, yes.
Once you do that, it's like they kind of want you to slow down a little bit,
That's right?
They want you to take a step back.
That's
because
correct.
They didn't necessarily they gave you that space, but necessarily kind of like for you. Every field in this country has their diversity department and ways they handle diversity and bringing in people of color, and you know what I mean, all of those things that look good on paper, but you actually have to step out and do. But do people truly change their minds?
No.
Is the question, right?
That's why we're here today in 2020.
Still talking about an
police reforms,
for you.
accountability.
Exactly.
Still talking about my case in particular for me.
In cases across the country where people have lost their lives because of things that are happening that are
So the person that tried to get me fired in 2003 called the person in 2012 and said, go after her.
Really?
And so these pieces are pieces that I put together along the way.
Okay. Do you have any evidence of that?
I do. It's all documented.
That is documented as well. See that? And so now here we are, 2020. I have to ask. So what is like the current status of your case? Because I know that this happened in 2003 starts. You have something starts in 2010. Then you have another incident hits 2012. It's 2020.
It's 2020.
What's happening?
I'm
what
still
is the current status?
Fighting. Right now, I won an appeal at civil service.
Okay, how long ago was that?
I won an appeal in 2000, maybe 3 years ago.
Okay.
And the case was transferred to an administrative agency called DALA.
Okay.
Division of Appeals Administrative.
Okay, thank you. And I'm about to say, for people who are like laymen like me, what does it mean?
It's a Division of Administrative Appeals.
But I'm saying, what is it? You won your appeal. So what does that do for you?
That allows me another chance to testify, which I was denied the right to testify. It gives me a chance to testify at civil service, and for there to be reconsideration of whether or not there was just cause for them to call this determination. I mean, we didn't talk about the fact that I was in limbo for 2 years after 2012 with absolutely no status.
Okay, thank you for stepping back. My apologies.
That's okay. I was in limbo with absolutely no status. It stopped the clock for my retirement.
Whether you were a police officer?
Correct.
Or whether you were out on leave, were you being paid?
No, I was not unpaid. I was not on leave, ADA, FMLA, nothing. They thought that it would be a good idea to leave me. When I say they, meaning the union attorneys, thought it would be a good idea to leave me in limbo, unbeknownst to me. They more than likely understood how it was going to negatively impact me.
I mean, it seems as if they were kind of hoping that you just said forget about it one day.
Correct.
Right? Like you were like, this is too much of a fight. This is too hard of a battle. It's too stressful. I'm just going to leave it alone.
Right.
And you did it. Good for you. So after those 2 years of being in limbo, then how did you get to the point of having?
I was cleared. I was actually
perfect.
cleared to return back to
Nice.
work
Okay.
in 2014. They wouldn't move the captain. They didn't want to separate us. They knew that I had concerns.
So he's still your superior officer after all of
Right, right. So obviously I'm not going to just come back to work into a hostile environment and not knowing what is going to occur next when no one's looking.
Okay.
He's the boogeyman to me at this point.
No, absolutely. So through all of this, right, it's shocking to me that you would go back in, right? And that's why we were talking about like protection, right?
So I didn't because I wasn't protected.
Thank you. That's what my question, like, why would you then go back into some place with somebody who has antagonized you, right?
And now he's spearheading any actions on this situation. I file a police report at the end of the suspension. The report goes viral. They code the report sexual assault, meaning the superior.
Mm-hmm.
He orders them not to take the report, not to approve the report. And in order to approve the report, you have to code what they call coding it.
Mm-hmm.
They coded it sexual assault. They got it out of the system. It went viral. That upset them, that the report went viral. He was directing the actions of a situation that he was involved in.
I was about to say, because he's your superior officer, so technically that's his job, right? Like,
technically it's not his job because there's a hierarchy and there are officers above him. He should not be directing the actions of a situation that he's involved in.
Okay, all right. Yep, conflict of interest, right?
Abuse of authority, power. This is where it happens.
Yes.
This is where the systemic racism and all of this stuff kind of happens because they have the power and the roles and the authority to do certain things that will negatively impact you and or permanently impact you.
No, and they have the power to change the narrative, right?
To changing the narrative.
That's what's
he changed the narrative.
Important to really, really understand here, right?
He ordered that they did not approve my report, and at the same time, he didn't file a report for 1 year. For 1 year.
Okay, wow.
He did do an email that omitted any information about justifiably taking the gun, being provoked into taking the gun, anything about apprehending or taking my gun in the manner that he did. He omitted that from his email.
And him taking a year to do it also continues to just lag time, right?
And
like
it goes against protocol.
Taking forever to get done. So here we are, 2020. You won that appeal. What now for you? Let's say
for me
what would be a win in this
they need
battle
to make
for you?
me whole. They need to make Officer James whole.
Okay, so what needs to be done in order for them to do that?
You know, to be honest with you, for 9 years I've been diplomatic. For 9 years I've been patient. For 9 years I followed every process that they put me through. Each process was done wrong. Every process was done with bias. The reason why I was able to win my appeal through civil service is because they were involved from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And they made certain that the AWOL status was expunged from my record and the 5-day suspension was reversed.
Okay.
So what's left on the table? No one wants to address that this white man recklessly and dangerously took my loaded firearm out of my retention holster. No one wants to address that.
And you guys never had an appeal about like that situation?
Well, here's what's interesting, and here's what I want people to understand. Here's where we call it systemic, but we have to identify it and define it.
Mm-hmm.
As we go through these different processes, they kept leaving that piece of it out of the conversation. It's my safety and my life being protected that I'm most concerned about.
But that's
nevertheless, I have the right to finish the career that I started.
No, absolutely. And that piece can't be fully addressed if it's always left out of the paperwork.
Correct.
And it's something that you keep addressing.
Correct.
Right? So then it seems as if this is something like you made up or something that didn't actually
It's their
happen.
narrative.
No, that's why I want to just kind of like
it's always their
right?
narrative.
Exactly. So
but the facts are the facts.
You have to always kind of take a step back.
Correct.
And kind of review what's going on. So, okay, with that being said now, like what is the message you want to get out there? You've dealt with the misogyny. You've dealt with a white supremacist patriarchal system that has you continuously, really right now, trying to still figure out 10 years later how you make yourself whole in a career that you start.
No, they're trying to ignore me, and they're trying to never make me whole. They're trying to make sure that I am not made whole. Officers get, so as we know, in the recent events that have happened in this era and in this movement, we know that it's rare for police officers to be fired. Mm-hmm. We know this.
Okay, yep. Talk to us about that. Why is it rare for police officers?
Because we have qualified immunity. We have layers and layers of protection with our union, and we actually have a patrolmen's association. Nevertheless, we have a high level of protection. It's a civil service position. Jobs that we weren't initially even allowed on. Affirmative action is how I was able to become a police officer. But let's be clear, I took an exam. I did well on the exam. I went through the academy. I successfully completed the academy. And I've been on the job. I've proven myself. I've worked with the community. I earned the right to finish my career, as they do. And so they're trying to erase me from all of my own legacy, from any conversation, and address and fix what was done wrong. Because they don't have a narrative that makes any sense. They don't have a narrative that really justifies his actions in placing me in fear. I have the right to be in a hostile-free environment. Let's go deeper than that. I have a right to be in an environment that's free of any impediments, but you grabbed my loaded firearm. That's different than someone pointing their finger in your face and yelling at you, making you feel a certain way. Yeah. He's endangered my life. Yeah. So now that brings things to a different level.
Yeah. Because it's not only endangered your life, it's endangered your livelihood. And that's the point that I really want to make.
They blackballed me.
Right? Yeah.
They blackballed me.
So your entire life is in danger now. And like,
they made sure that I was blackballed.
That sucks as a Black woman, right? Like, it sucks as a woman, sucks for anybody doing any job, right? How can you then live, right? It's like
you can't.
You're constantly kind of going back and forth.
I'm the living dead. That's what you're. And people don't understand that you do what you can to take care of yourself. You do what you can to keep your spirits up, but there's so many ways to kill us off.
It has a mental toll.
It has a mental toll, has a physical toll, and you're constantly worried about your future. Again, I have the right to finish my career, to pursue my dreams, to pursue all the things that I want to pursue. And they snatched it away from me. And how did they do that? They created a narrative. They didn't even follow proper protocol to terminate.
So that's why I was just talking about like kind of like the message that you want to get out there, right? About other women dealing with this.
Black women cannot continue to be erased from the conversation and treated like we're expendable. That's not, we didn't get this far to go back, to go all the way back to a beginning where our lives just don't matter. Our livelihoods don't matter. I earned this job. I receive accolades, I got accommodation, I have an exemplary record, and it's such a travesty right now that we are discussing equal rights, we're discussing the movement and the direction we're going in. We are applauding the fact that we have a VP candidate who's a Black woman, and yet and still, I'm going through this.
Yeah, you and a lot of other
I am no longer a police officer without any justifiable reason. And just 4 days ago, an attorney for the association said to me, "You must have pissed off the wrong people."
Really? So just stating out there, just making the wrong people mad will ruin your career, and that's just what it is.
That's
so maybe
just what
you should just be quiet and not make the wrong people upset. Huh?
Right. Just go away.
Yeah. And I think that is the story that a lot of Black women have dealt with in the professional world, right? Walking into a room, seeing people who don't look like you, but are like you because this is the career field that you all chose, right?
That's right.
And to be an officer, you endangered your life, you're protecting other people, you're caring about your community. And so the only other question I have to ask is, as you're dealing with this, figuring out how to take care of yourself and moving on and figuring out how to be whole without them doing what they were supposed to do to make you whole. What's up with like family, friends, supports? Like, just like how are you living right now? How you doing?
Doing horrible. I'm destitute. Doing horrible. It's taken a toll on me. People don't fully understand why it's not resolved. They don't understand the process. They don't understand what systemic racism really looks like. It's a more comfortable conversation for me now, unfortunately, because of everything that has occurred recently. But it was a lot of explaining to people how they can do this. And we've got to remember our history. We've got to remember what they've done to us, what they still are allowed to do to us, and how these kind of situations happen and fester, and how there is no resolve unless we stand in our truth and we go the distance, whatever that means.
No, yeah,
because the challenge for me to explain this over and over again for 9 years has been, mind-boggling to me. But I think it's a lot of people not really remembering what we did to even get here, to be allowed to be on these jobs, to be able to vote, to be able to, say that we're worth more money. They should value us. I mean, there were ancestors that did things to put us in this position, so we've got to use our voices. We have to.
Absolutely. And I applaud you, honestly, because as I said, I went through a particular situation and I was too distraught to fight, right? It got to that point where, like you said, they left you lagging for 2 years, right?
Right.
In hopes that you would just be like, too much of a battle. And I believe that is where so many Black women find themselves. Even I found myself, right? Like, you know what? I'm fighting an entire system, right? How do I, as one person, fight an entire system when you need support and backing to do that? So the reason that I thought that it was so important to talk to you today is to get that message out there, so that other Black women can understand that no matter what field they work in, especially if they're a police officer and you're literally endangering your life. Like I worked in education. I wasn't in any physical danger, right? But I was still in danger of somebody else being able to take away my lifestyle based on my chosen career. And I think that's the part of the situation that we're seeing here, that we have to use our voices and we have to speak out and continue fighting, because if we don't, then who knows that this battle even exists?
Well,
right? And I think they know it, but as I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
One of my concerns is that they're setting a precedence.
No, exactly, and that's where I was getting at, right? By changing the paperwork, by creating their own narrative, they have the opportunity to put on paperwork that the situation was one thing versus what it actually was, and that's where we have to be very, very careful. You speak of history, and I always keep it real simple when it comes to Black Americans, right? I say we were enslaved, we were segregated, and now we're relegated by policy, right? Meaning the paperwork's just changing on us. And so it's not only happening on like a huge macro scale, but it's happening on big, very, very micro levels, where it's happening to you, it's happening to me, and it's happening to many, many women across the country. And I just say,
so why do you think it's not being addressed?
Well, I mean, I was speaking to you about a conference that I went to not too long ago. And one thing that I learned there that was super dope for me, because I used to work in diversity, and I always throw it in quotes, right? I went to a school where it was supposed to be for diversity purposes. I ran programs for diversity purposes. And that's just this year I learned that diversity is an $8 billion industry in America. And the dial hasn't changed much since I was 10 years old, right? Or even since civil rights, right? It hasn't really changed much. The policies just keep changing. And I think what happens is you have, and this is just my opinion, right? But you have people who are maybe, they think well of change, and they want to see change, and they talk of change, but then you actually have to walk in that, right? Like, then you actually have to have the actions that make a difference. And I don't think everybody's with those actions, right? I think everybody the society that we live in talks a lot. I mean,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So we talk a lot. We write things down and change the narrative a lot. But are we walking the walk to actually see this change
Right.
every single day? And the answer as of right now, at least for me and my experiences, is no. And talking to you, and hearing the experiences that you went through, which are horrific and horrible and have gone on for all this time, this for you started in 2003. It's 2020, so clearly the answer for you is also
Correct.
no, right?
Correct.
So all these little micro levels, but there's such a bigger picture that needs to be addressed. And then underneath that umbrella, so many different people have so many different thoughts, so many different ideologies. Like, how do we truly move forward is the question from here. So, I don't know. Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate you. Can I give you a hug? Can I give you a hug? I'm a hugger, just so you know. I'm kind of weird like that. But we gotta stick together, and that's one fight. That's one way that we fight too, is united.